Okay, so my work tends to be built on two premises: that science and technology won't solve the eco-crisis, at least not alone. We need arguments, images, motivations, models, habits, etc. All of that, I'm sure, we all agree with. And that for understanding socio-ecological issues, culture and nature dualism is a flawed starting point, and the two cultures rift is debilitating. If science studies objects objectively, then the humanities study projects projectively. At least that's how I like to put it. There are limits to that. So I draw on a variety of theories, developing my own particular approach, which looks a little like that, probably too hard to read, but that's okay. One of my focuses has been the relationship between land, ecology, nature, landscape, place, space, and identity, culture, and so on. I won't go through that. I've done some work in Eastern Europe, particularly in Ukraine and around there. Some in Cape Breton Island, in the West Coast, in the Southwest US, in Southwest England. And that work led me to an interest in visual culture and how it shapes our perception of place and landscape. And working in the Southwest US, I was particularly interested in people's responses, particularly people who've migrated and moved to a place called Sedona, the Red Rock landscape, for the reason that when they first encountered it, they were just in awe of it. They had dreamed of it, they had whatever. And I realized that some of them had actually seen it in movies. A lot of Westerns, movies like Close Encounters of the Third Kind portray, although it's not that landscape, portray a certain emotional connection to particular landscapes. So I got interested in visuality and nature. In the way, for instance, that's been very instrumental for the environmental and conservation movements. The way John Muir, for instance, got his friends who were photographers and landscape painters to come out west to portray the landscapes that would become the national parks in the US national park system. That leads me into eco-media and eco-cinema studies. So the term eco-media, and I was sort of imagining that Peter would talk about eco-media and I would talk about eco-cinema. So eco-media has gotten to be used by a growing number of people who are sort of media scholars, communication scholars, who study what I think of as media from an eco-critical perspective, but some of them study what they consider to be eco-media. Now, the term gets used by practitioners as well, including ad makers, corporations like CBS, who are producing ads that have to do with ecology, with green messages. Some would call it greenwashing. I think it's both that and other things. But it's also used by this growing network of eco-media studies scholars, just to refer to all kinds of media, non-print for the most part media, including film and video and various forms of new media, other sorts of things. Within that, there's eco-cinema studies, and I just wanted to give a sort of 1-minute capsule version of how that has developed. So that term seems to have caught on in ways that others that were suggested by people haven't, like eco-critical film studies, although some people use that, eco-film studies, green film studies, eco-cinecriticism, my term, which didn't catch on, and eco-cinema studies, which has caught on. And this is a field that really over the last 15 years or so has grown. Starts out with people writing books about nature documentaries, wildlife documentaries, and kind of probing the assumptions around documentary realism. How accurate are representations of nature? How inaccurate, how misleading, how culturally embedded they are within all sorts of assumptions and things. There's also a tradition of media effects literature which has kind of filtered into this. So how do environmental films change attitudes? And this has been a prominent focus. It's gotten the most media attention, I think, of this sort of work. And the other thing that's been very popular is a focus on images and representations of nature, of animals, of wilderness, of environmentalism and environmentalists and things like that, which is built on more constructivist premises that, you know, these images and representations can be better or they can be worse, similar to the way feminist theorists would look at images and representations of women and so on. More recently, there's been a real growth in work that studies the perceptual and affective impacts of films, of media, from a variety of angles. That's where a lot of my work has been focused. And something that I kind of threw a bunch of things together here that's probably the latest growth phase of this, within this rubric of cultural and media ecologies, cultural circulation models, which we take from cultural studies, events, communities, resonance, lived culture, the way films and media images have an impact in various ways, new media networks. So drawing on the media ecology tradition that goes back to Marshall McLuhan and Harold Innis and others like that, that look at how media entangle people and technologies and other sorts of things in various sorts of systems and networks, and eco-ontologies, various forms of new materialism and stuff like that. And in my own work, this book just came out through the Wilfrid Laurier University Press Environmental Humanities series a couple of months ago. I try to present an eco-philosophy of the cinema, which looks at how moving images shape perception, how they create worlds and take us into them cognitively and affectively, and how those worlds and our experience of them interact with the real world that pre-exists those cinematic experiences and that post-exists it, and how all of these moving images around us are becoming networked, immersive, pervasive, subliminal, intertwined in many ways, so that we need to shift from focusing on images of ecology to an ecology of images, which the way I look at it consists of material ecologies, social ecologies, or political ecologies, and perceptual ecologies, which have to do with sort of the epistemological, epistemic effects and affective impacts of film and visual media. And I think that's all I have to. Wow.